Hey, what's up, everybody? Happy Sunday to you. Hopefully, you had a great Christmas. I did have a great Christmas around here. Number one, had some great time with the family. Went and saw a movie. It was sweet. And then, of course, got to be repping the new sweatshirt today. If you saw on Twitter, my 16-year-old made this for me, so was pretty pumped about that. Never thought I'd have merch, but here it is. So anyway, I hope you had a Merry Christmas as well. And yesterday was okay. Real quick, looking back, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but man, the Lakers yesterday, I think it's really concerning. I know that Anthony Davis is out, but basically the Nets have Harden, and that's about it. And it was still a loss. And I mean, they made it close at the end, but they looked really bad through most of that game. So I think it's pretty concerning for the Lakers in terms of the long term. But we're going to jump back in today, basically even for the week. And my goal is always to be positive for the week. And I think we got a few good spots today. So I'm optimistic about where we can end up. My approach today, we're heading to the in-laws for some Christmas. So I didn't go as in depth on every game, just so you know that up front. Isaac, thanks, man. Did have a great holiday. Hope you did too. But what I did is I got into every game, and as I saw spots that looked pretty good, I went deeper to kind of make sure that they looked as good as I thought they did. And then if stuff just kind of didn't look very good, I didn't go as deep. So you'll kind of see that as we go through the breakdown today. But I do have at least something on every game for you. Hope that helps you make your decisions today. So let's have a good day after Christmas. All right, we're going to start out with the Magic and the Heat today. And the interesting thing here, as far as I can tell for Miami, is that Jimmy Butler, there's a possibility that he's going to be back. And that definitely changes things in this game. I mean, what I was looking at before is got the news that Dedmon's out, and now I think Lowry is out as well. And so that leaves Miami basically with Duncan and Hero, and that's about it. And Orlando, I do like some of their young players, even though they haven't necessarily, they're young and they're not going to play great all the time. But Wagner and Carter Jr. should be back. Cole Anthony, I mean, he's been really good at the point guard position this year. And so with as wide as this spread was at like plus 8.5 or even plus 9.5, I kind of liked Orlando here. Now, if Jimmy Butler plays, it kind of mucks things up a little bit because he can come in and really steady Miami. But I'd keep an eye on that news. This is one where I didn't go too in depth. One of the things here is just Orlando really struggles to score. So they've scored over 105 only in 3 of their last 17 and none of their last 7 games. So they just don't put up a lot of points. Their margin of victory isn't terrible, though. So in their last 8 losses, they lost by 6, 6, 7, and then 10, 12, 12, and then 2, and then 12 again. So like half the time in their last 8 where they've lost, they are covering the spread. And especially if Miami ends up being without Butler today, I think this is actually a decent spot for Orlando because Miami just doesn't have a lot left. And I think Orlando would have enough to compete with them. So I'm definitely not going heavy on this game. There was one trend as well. Orlando's 5-2 against the spread in their last 7 against Miami. So that leans that way as well. So again, if Butler's in, I'm probably off it. If he's out, I may end up going in on Orlando for a unit here or something. We'll see. Next one up is Memphis and Sacramento. Oh, man. Well, Memphis, not good since Ja came back, kind of to be expected. And Sacramento has been absolutely terrible. However, Sacramento is getting a lot of people back today. Fox is still a game time decision, but they're getting most of their other people back. Holmes came back last game, and it really didn't do a lot for him. But having him there as a piece is important. Um, and so when I look at this game, they've played twice this year already, once in November and once in December. And Memphis won both of those games, one by 19 and one by 27. But here's the problem is that both of those games were without Morant. And that was when Memphis really had it rolling. And Sacramento, especially in that December game, had a bunch of people out, and it wasn't a good spot for them. And so I think it's hard to take. At first, when I saw that, I was like, man, this is a great spot for Memphis. I like Memphis. I like their team total. But it gets a little trickier because those were games where Morant was out and Sacramento wasn't at full strength, even though their full strength still isn't good. Um, the two things that I'm really looking at here are Memphis's team total and then the game total overall. Memphis's team total is 114.5. The total is 225.5 for the game overall. Like I said, I struggle to go to Memphis just because they haven't scored as well with Morant this year. And those 2 games against Sacramento before they didn't have him. when you look at the totals for the last 10 games for not these teams against each other, but separately, 50% of the time it's gone over 225 and a half. And so it's one of those where yeah, it feels tough to pick a side. But I think where I'm going here is like if Memphis can still score decently, Morant is more harmful to Memphis on defense than he is on offense. So and Sacramento's not a good defensive team, even when they're at full strength. And so I think if Memphis can even get close to their team total here, I think Sacramento puts up more of a fight. They only scored 101 and 105 in the first two meetings. I wouldn't be surprised for them to get to that 110 to 115 range. And so this is a spot where ultimately I do like the over for the game as a whole. The over is also 4-0 in the last four between these two teams in Sacramento. So there is one strong trend there as well that points to the over. And that's where I would go in this game if I was looking to be on something here. Corey, Merry Christmas to you as well. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. All right, we're through the first two, on to Toronto and Cleveland. This was one where I do have a couple stats, but this one is tough. So Siakam might play for Toronto, but if you go look at their roster for today, if he doesn't, this is a straight up G League team. I mean, I know they have a couple veterans playing. I understand that, but really, like it's not an NBA caliber team. But for Cleveland as well, they also have a ton of people out. And we talked about this before their last game. I mean, Taco Fall had a pretty good game. But man, they miss all these guys on the inside. I think even if they had Ed Davis, I could see him and Garland getting it going a little bit. When you look at this last game, they were way lower in assists. And I think that that's not a huge surprise because a lot of those assists come from the pick and roll game. And Taco Fall, while he played decent, is not athletic enough to run the pick and roll like Jared Allen would or Mobley or even Ed Davis. And so I think those assists are going to continue to take a hit. And that's a big hit to Cleveland overall, because that's where a lot of their good offense and ball movement comes from. One thing I did look at here, though, is in their last game, Cleveland didn't shoot well at all. So they shot 39% from the field and 23.7% from three-point range. And they still only lost by 10 to an okay Boston team. Boston plays at a low pace. And Cleveland scored 101 points. So it's not like one of these games where they came out and only put up 85 or something. They scored the ball okay with a terrible shooting performance. So this is where I think that the Cleveland team total is a little bit interesting in this game. When I first looked at it, I think it was 105.5. And I don't think that's too bad against a Toronto team that really shouldn't be able to put up too much in terms of defense. And actually, one of the reasons I gravitate toward the team total here is that Siakam helps Toronto on offense, but not really on defense. So even if he plays, their defensive rating with Siakam is 113.8, and without him, it's 105.7. So they're 8 points better in defensive rating when Siakam doesn't play this year. So I just full disclosure, I haven't actually put anything down on this game yet, but it is one where I'm considering that team total. The main thing that concerns me is just the lack of athletic bigs for Garland to be able to run that pick and roll. But I think it's not a bad spot for sure. And then really, especially if Siakam doesn't play, Cleveland should be able to cover the 6.5 even without those guys in. But I may stay away from it just because, again, it's taken away one of the things that they do best. All right, on to the next one. We got the 76ers and the Wizards. The Wizards are a team that I have loved to fade, but today might be a different story. So you've heard me talk a number of times recently, if you've been on here, about these waves that come through for NBA teams, whether positive or negative. And I think we're on a negative one for Philly right now, man. Like they look terrible. If Embiid doesn't play great, they're basically screwed. They can't score the ball. And it's crazy because they have some okay offensive players, like with Seth Curry and Embiid for sure. A few other guys, like it's kind of amazing that they've been as bad as they have been. But I think there's another reason to like Washington okay here, and that is that Bradley Beal is expected to be out again, as well as KCP, by the way. But so the Wizards are 4-0 this year without Beal. Their wins were only by 1, 12, 5, and 7. So it's been close games. But they're 4-0, and in those games, they've scored 135. That was most recently 104, 105, and 124. So the 104 and 105, not great, although okay for Washington, but two big scoring games would be allowed. And when you look at the numbers underneath that, it becomes pretty clear why that's the case. So offensive rating with Beal this year for Washington is 107.6. Without him, it's 121. Defensive rating 111.2 with Beal, 114.5 without him. So not quite as good. And that's the same when you look at the points they've scored and points allowed. I mean, they're averaging 124 points a game without Beal. And I read off those exact scores. So, a couple of those were lower and a couple were higher. But all that to say, well, number one, Beal hasn't shot it well most games this season. He's had a couple better ones recently. But I think number two, when some of these stars go out who are so ball dependent, like Beal, who's going to suck up a lot of the usage, that usage starts to get spread around. In particular, I think Spencer Dinwiddie feels a lot more free with Beal off the court. He made some veiled comments that kind of sounded that direction. I mean, he didn't say anything negative about Beal, but I think Dinwiddie feels the freedom to really run the game then, to press, to try to score, to get better assist numbers when he's not scoring. And so I think Washington actually plays freer on offense without Beal on the floor. And I think that's a positive for them. Now, Philadelphia, the one thing they've done is they have played decent defense, and they've been able to slow things down. Certainly, Washington doesn't have a big who can really match up against Embiid, and we have to acknowledge that. Like, he's going to be the biggest guy on the floor. But the question is he going to impose himself, or is he going to stand out on the perimeter and shoot again? And he's kind of gone back and forth in these games recently, and I'm not sure which tactic he'll take. A key number here is Philadelphia's three-point percentage. So they're 10-3 when they shoot 33% or better from three-point range, which isn't even that high of a number. 10-3 since the beginning of November, sorry. They're 2-11, so they've had 13 games under 33% and 13 above it. They're only 50-50 on that, and they're 12-11 when they shoot under that. They've been 33% or better in only one of their last 5 games. And that's what I'm talking about, this wave where things are not going well for them right now. They were 4 of the last 5 before that, so it's not like they can't shoot over that, but they haven't been recently. Washington only allows 33.2% from three-point range at home, so right around that number. And they've held opponents under 33% in 5 straight games. So these are two teams that I think are moving different directions right now. And because of that, I actually like Washington here a little bit, and also like Washington's team total pretty well because of the way they've been scoring. Of the games we've talked about so far, this is probably one of my favorite spots. It feels weird and hard to say that I like Washington, but they're getting 3.5 points in a game where if I looked at the numbers and looked at the way that these two teams have been going, I think I would like them straight up, actually, if I had to pick. All right, the next game is the Pelicans and the Thunder. Not the best two teams, but these are two teams who have actually been playing better recently. The Pelicans have been winning close games, and so their record looks good lately, even though they haven't been blowing teams out. But they were losing all those close games before. And Oklahoma City has been playing well also. In their last 5, they've won 3 out of the 5. One loss was actually to the Pelicans, 110 to 113. And then they lost to Phoenix recently, but they only lost to Phoenix by 12, so they beat the spread in that game. So again, both of these teams are playing well. It does look like Valanciunas is still going to be out for the Pelicans, and also Nickeil Alexander-Walker, where the Thunder should be pretty healthy. And they're playing in Oklahoma City, where Oklahoma City tends to play better at home. Now, this is one of those where I didn't go quite as deep into the breakdown of this game, because I think both teams are playing pretty decent, and it's probably lined pretty well as something close to a pick 'em. I think Oklahoma City is -1 or -1.5. There are trends, relatively strong trends toward Oklahoma City and toward the under. So if I end up doing anything more with this game, those are the ways that I'll look, just because I think that that's the way that I would lean anyway on this game. New Orleans has been scoring around 105 and giving up around 105 in their last 5 games. Oklahoma City, 105, 104. So at 211, if you can get 211 or 211.5, I think that's not a bad spot to be under that. Okay, next game. This is the one I'm going to spend very little time on, and that's the Pistons and the Spurs. The Spurs have been playing awesome, but in a little bit of a turn, they're actually playing even better away from home recently than they are at home. And they're at home today playing Detroit. But Detroit's already bad, and they have no one left. Cunningham, Grant, Hayes, Lee, Lyles, Stewart. I mean, Lyles had a great game in his last game, and now he's out. So Detroit has no one left. What you need to know is they're starting Luka Garza. And I like Luka Garza fine. I enjoyed watching him in college. But I think if you're having to start him as an NBA team, it kind of tells you what you need to know about the spot that you're in. San Antonio absolutely should roll here. That 9.5 point spread, I just feel like this could be a letdown spot for San Antonio after playing so great on the road and beating some at least decent teams. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't see any reason they shouldn't win by 15 to 20 here, but I just don't have a great feeling about it. And because of where Detroit's roster is at, there's no way to really dive into numbers that are meaningful or trends that are meaningful here. I can't come up with evidence to support that other than the Spurs are good and Detroit's really bad. That's not enough for me to go in on it, but that's where I'm at on that game. All right, we got 2 games left. Next one is one that I'm interested in, and that's the Nuggets and the Clippers. The Nuggets should be a little bit healthier. They had Bones Highland out. It's an ankle issue for him that's going to be day to day, but it sounded like there's a good chance he could play. It also sounds like there's a good chance Gordon could play, who they were without in their last game. Denver playing away from home right now. This is another one that's crazy. Like beginning of the season, it was better for them to play at home. They were playing phenomenal defense, holding teams to 95 points a game and really doing a lot better at home. But recently, they're actually playing a lot better on the road. But the reason is not their defense, it's their offense. They've been scoring like crazy. In their last 5 away from home, they're averaging 114 points a game, where they only average 105.9 on the season. So they're beating that by 8 or 9 points a game. Now, they did have one game in there that was 94 points. That was their most recent one. But to me, if you take that out, that average of 114 even goes up more. They're also not playing great defense on the road, though, giving up 112.6 on average per game, where on the season they only give up 106.5. So they're 6 points worse in terms of what they're allowing on defense away from home as well. They're going up against a Clippers team today that's without Paul George and without Reggie Jackson. And those are, to me, their 2 key pieces. Morris is a game time decision, and it does help them if he plays, especially with those 2 guys out. But here's one of the things that's really interesting to me and ended up directing how I chose to bet this game, because I do have some stuff in on this game already. And that's when you look at the Clippers without Paul George and without Reggie Jackson, not together because the sample size is way too small, but individually. So this year without Paul George, the Clippers are actually 6 points better on offense. I think this goes back to that Bradley Beal thing, that George is going to suck up the offense and it's all going to run through him, and it's probably not as free when he's on the court. Oh, I'm sorry. They're 6 points better on offense. I read that wrong, though that I think can be true with George. But 10 points worse on defense was my point here. Paul George is really important to them on defense, and Reggie Jackson is similar. They're 3 points better on offense when he plays, but they're 5 points worse on defense. So 10 worse for George and 5 worse for Jackson. Those numbers for Jackson were from 2001 because he's only been out 1 game this year. So there's not really enough to go off of there statistically. So put that together. Denver's been scoring a lot away from home. The Clippers should be worse on defense today than they normally are with both Jackson and George out. And so where I chose to go with this in terms of a larger bet was Denver's team total, which I believe was 107.5, which is up there a little bit. But again, I think this situation is really good for them. I did also go 1 unit on Denver against the spread. One key trend here is Denver is 5-0 against the spread in their last 5 at the Clippers. So I think both the numbers and the trends are really positive toward Denver today in LA against the spread, and also I like their team total. You could go with the game total over. I just don't know what to expect from the Clippers with Jackson and George both out, and so that was the reason I didn't go with the game total as a whole. So that's a spot I really do like today. I think it's probably, in terms of numbers and trends, one of the stronger spots on the card. Last game is Indiana against the Bulls. Brogdon and Sabonis are both game time decisions here, so that's definitely something to watch. Indiana is on a 4-game losing streak away from home. The last game that they won away was when they beat Chicago 109-77 before all the COVID stuff happened for the Bulls. So this is quite a while back now. And in those last 4 games away from home, it's not been good for Indiana. They've only scored 100 points 1 out of those 4 games, and it was 100 exactly. So they've been under 100 in 3 out of the 4. They have played okay on defense, at least in 2 of those 4, 100 and 102. But in their most recent 2 games away from home, they gave up 125 and 114. I mean, they just got destroyed. in those two spots. Chicago, on the other hand, has looked pretty decent since coming back from all the COVID stuff. They did play without Zach LaVine, and it looks like he'll be back today. They will still be without Caruso, which hurts them a little bit. But they beat the Lakers, which in retrospect may not be that great of a win. So coming off of COVID and beating the Lakers by 5, I thought, okay, that might be a pretty good win. But seeing what the Lakers are doing here, I'm not sure it actually is great. They basically beat the Lakers by the same amount that James Harden did by himself. Well, Patty Mills helped him, but for Brooklyn yesterday. So that win isn't as great. But they've had 2 good games. They've scored well in those two games since they've been back, and we can't totally take that away from them. Interesting thing here is diving into how the Pacers look without Brogdon and Sabonis is that by the numbers, Indiana's actually better without Brogdon. They're 1 point better in offensive rating and 1 point better in defensive rating. A little bit hard to explain because I think Brogdon is a good player. And again, it's pretty even. It's not like it's huge numbers, but just to say there's not a massive dip when he's out. And then with Sabonis, we have to go back to 2021 because, again, it's a 1-game sample, and that's just not enough this year to take anything from. They were basically the same on offense, but they were worse on defense without Sabonis. So when I look at this game, I think it's still a little bit hard to trust Chicago, especially with LaVine coming back today. I absolutely love them in the long run. But Indiana, on the other hand, has been playing really bad recently and not scoring the ball well. And so I don't really trust them either. I think that this game is probably lined pretty well. I mean, it's Indiana plus 8.5. You know, if we had like a 4.5 here, maybe I'd be interested in Chicago. But I can see Chicago not coming out and absolutely blowing the doors off of Indiana in this one. Also, in terms of the trends, like that pushes me that way a little bit more. Indiana's actually won 12 of their last 15 against Chicago outright. They're 7-2 against the spread in their last 9 against Chicago, and 4-1 straight up in their last 5 playing at Chicago. So, I do, like I've said before, I do look at the numbers first, but when it's a spread that I think is close to where it should be, and then the trends push in the direction that's opposite of where I would want to go anyway, that leads me to kind of stay away from games for the most part. So I'll keep an eye through the day on whether Brogdon and Sabonis are playing, give a little more thought to this, see where the line goes. If Brogdon and Sabonis get ruled in and this line comes back way closer to even, that would actually make me more interested in the Bulls than I am right now at the current line. So that's what I'm looking at for the games today. Hopefully there was some stuff in there that can help you as you make your decisions. Let's have a good day here. End the week positive. We're basically even for the week. And after a big week last week, it would be nice to add a little bit to it today. Have a great day after Christmas. Hope it's a good Sunday for you, and I'll talk to you later.